I'm here today to read a letter from John. I think it was JT's cousin. He wasn't able to be here today, so he asked that this be read. Most of you thought I was an only child, but in many ways not so. I had 3 big sisters and a brother. Yes, 3 big sisters, Shirley, Pat, and Jane, who even fought for time to watch over me as a baby, and who were my sisters as I grew older. And I had a brother, JT, only 6 years older than myself. I remember playing ball together at the old house on Elm and 5th Street. As he got older, we were still shared in fun things and a lot of church life, playing music, and how he could play that stand-up bass. And when the Spirit would begin to move, he would slap those strings in joyful worship. I accompanied him, working several times as he began to evangelize in Illinois, playing the piano for his services. We had a good time together then, and working youth camps together. He always had time for me, and I looked up to him. As time went on, he experienced some rough times like we all do, and one time came to live with us. That was a time again for us to be close. He knew how to struggle and fight to win. I saw him win out so many times. As he got older, and in the last several years, we have not been able to see each other often, but have talked very often. Long talks about everything and everybody. Our family has a distinct sense of humor passed down through a long generation of family elders who knew how to have fun and saw the comedy in almost everything. Just a glance and we all knew what was happening and the fun behind it. While in our talks we mostly laughed and talked about our grandkids, I knew everything about Tyler, Emily, Carson, and Brandon, and he knew everything about our 7. We talked about our health issues and our determination to keep on. Last time I saw JT was at my house in Knoxville a couple of years ago. I took him aside and expressed this to him. I told him he was my hero and my example of how to keep on in difficult times with our health. I kissed him and told him he was my brother. Our talks in the last few months took a different turn. They were not so much about us, but our concern for the state of the church and the need of the moving of the Spirit. We both expressed over and over again the longing to see God move again as we had seen as a child, the real move of God. We prayed for a revival to come that would show our grandchildren the power of Pentecost. If he would speak to us today, he would challenge us to take a look at our lives, line up with the Word, and get on fire for God and win a world that is lost and facing the soon return of the Lord. My heart is broken today, but is more glad that he has won the victory and has received his abundance entrance into heaven. As the oldest of our family in that line now, I've gotten big shoes to fill on a long list of saints. Finally, I love all more than you will ever know. I commit to praying for you every day and blessing you all with God's best. We are a family, a strong family, talented family, caring family, and hardworking family, a family that for over 100 years has stayed true to the Pentecost message. Let's keep the faith as JT did. Miss being with you all, John.
As I said last night, as we did this in Taylorville, times like this are difficult at best. Today is an exception in many ways. I was sharing with somebody a while ago. They said, oh, it would probably be easier doing it a second time. I said, no, it's worse. One of the things that is bittersweet, and this is home. I look around this room now, some that have been through today and had to leave, and many of us have not seen each other 20 years, 25 years, 30 years, and it's just a shame that it takes this to bring us together. But it's also a blessing that this brings us together. And I just want to take a moment to say thank you to each and every one of you. I told my wife on the way down here, I said, there's a guy, I won't say his name. Some of you know who it is when I use just the first name. I said, Steve will be there. Steve never attended this church. Steve was our arch rival. He pitched for another church's fast pitch team, and I said, if I know Steve, Steve will be there. A couple hours ago, I was standing over here, and I looked across here, and there's a guy I've not laid eyes on in 35 years. But I walked over and I said, Steve. He stood there for a minute. His wife said, yeah, that's Steve. And I said, I knew you would be here, and here's why. He said, we could fight it out on the ball field. He said, but when it was over, we were friends. And he said, more importantly, we were brothers in Christ. That's what makes this so special. Hearts are grieving right now. It's hard. But I say this in all sincerity. I envy JT right now. When he breathed his last the other day, he stepped out of this world of pain and into a brand new threshold of reality that one day soon we're all going to encounter if you know Jesus. And I believe if there's anything else that could be said today, that would be the most important thing. If you don't know Jesus, don't wait another moment. Can you say that at a funeral? You better believe it. Let me share this just before I get serious into what I'm supposed to be doing today. probably about 6 months ago, JT and I were talking, and we were talking about some of the training that Brother Jesse Wiggins gave to him, myself, several others ministers that started out from this church. I won't go into all that he told us, and I told him, I said, you know, I've used those words over and over and over again. And he said, Darrell, remember this. He said, when I die, I want people crying. I want people boo-hooing. I want people passing out all over the place. He said, I want it to be something that nobody ever forgets. That was JT. And I share that today because I want you to remember not just the goodbye. Remember the life. That's what it's all about. In Hebrews, the 11th chapter, the word says, by faith Abraham obeyed when he was called to go out into a place which he would receive an inheritance. And when he went out not knowing where he was going, by faith he dwelt in a land of promise, in a foreign country, dwelling in tents with Isaac and Jacob, the heirs with him of the same promise. For he waited for a city which has foundations, whose builder and maker is God. And I shared it last night. That's an unusual passage to open up a funeral service with. But the more I have thought about this moment, I thought about the life which JT lived. From the time that I met him, we've laughed, we've cried, we've fought, we've done all kinds of things, but the one constant has been Jesus Christ. From the time that I was just a young boy, he instilled in me, sometimes quite forcefully, the importance of being in church, the importance of serving the Lord. So today as we're gathered together, you know, I look at this time, and again, I look out and I see some of your faces. Some of you know this happened. I walked up and I said, I'm sorry, I know the face, and it's connecting, but I can't put the name together. Don't let this happen again. Use this as a catalyst to be together. Because you know what? This world's getting stranger and stranger and more difficult every day. And we need each other. We need to bind together and hold one another up, not just at times like this. It's not easy to get up here. My mind's racing. I'm thinking the last time I stood in this pulpit, completely different circumstances, Brother Jesse Wiggins was pastor. And he was bringing all the guys through that had launched their ministry, birthed out of this church. And I thought about standing up here today, and I thought, Lord, this is not easy. It was easy back then because I was standing up, can I say it this way, showing off. Today I come up here humbled. And I mean this sincerely, that with all the people that JT has known in his life, connected to overseers, general overseers, and leaders throughout our denomination, that when Jamie called and said he wanted you to do this, my first instinct was no, but then I thought, what an honor that among all those people, he would say, I want Darrell and Jerry to speak at my funeral. And so I stand here today at his request, honoring him this last time. Let me just say this publicly. I am so thankful, and that doesn't begin to do justice, for the Christian heritage that has been passed on, not only through the Kelly family, but through the Garrett family, but through JT and his family. As John just shared in his letter. My earliest memories of this family, I remember coming down from Iowa where I was living at that time, and when June and JT got married, and I was in the back seat of the car, and the one and only time I ever met JT's father. He was on the front seat, and we were going to Blocks, which many of you are like, what's a Blocks? If you lived in Alton, you know Blocks. And I listened to the two of them talk, getting ready for a marriage, but the conversation was directed toward the church and the things that Christ was doing. And then a couple of years later, when I became part of the family and moved in with them, and June and JT and our family lived next door to Grandma Kelly. His sister Phyllis and their daughters Becky and Luann, and we would go over to that living room, the piano set in the back corner, and Grandma, Effie to some of you, would get on that piano and she would begin to play. And it wasn't just anything happened. I'm telling you, the anointing of God would fill that house. I can remember Grandma jumping up off that piano and shouting in that living room. And I can remember times where JT or John or different ones, or Richard Musgraves there at the house, and sermons would be preached in that house. And being as honest as I can, at that point, I'm sitting there not really comprehending what was going on. It didn't really hit home in the depth of my spirit then, but as I became older and I look back at those moments, I realized seeds were being sown into my heart. I traveled with JT many times. He played bass with the Gospel 4 singing group. I remember sometimes in the dead of winter there was no heat on that bus other than they had a little oil burner in the back, and we would be huddled up around. Then Terry, their drummer, and I would usually weasel in there because we were the smallest of the group. But I would go to those places, and I'll be honest, at 12 years old, I would hear those things, and I'd hear them singing, and it was good music. But I didn't know seeds were being planted. This last Tuesday, I walked back into the hospice center and I saw JT laying in the bed. And I knew this was going to be the last time I saw it. And I touched him and I said, "Can you hear me?" And he said, "Yeah." And I said, "No, can you hear me?" And he opened his eyes and looked at me. And I said, "There's some things I want to say to you." And I said, "Thank you." And he had that look, puzzled. He said, "Thank you for pointing me to Jesus Christ. And thank you for the life you gave to me." Let me share this for those of you who don't know me and how I fit into this family. Through the circumstances in our family, most of you that do know me know my parents had died young, and I lived in Iowa, and things happened there, and we were divided up, and Danny and I said I wasn't going to do it, but I called him a demon last night, and I'll call him a demon again. I'm home now, I can share this. Danny and I came to live with June and JT. Bud, as we call him today, Goober for some of you who knew him then, Gordon for those you old-timers who knew him way back when. Went to live with Bob and Roberta. We came down on June 22nd, 1970 to live with them. June 23rd, the phone rings, and the voice on the other end says, "You are not going to believe who's standing on my doorstep." Danny and Bud hitchhiked back to Davenport, Iowa. And JT, in his calm of voice as he could muster, said, "Put them on a bus, and I will deal with them when they get here." And I remember riding with him down in that Pontiac that he had, going down to the station in downtown Alton. They got in the car. Danny's sitting right there. He can tell you if I'm telling you the truth. They did not say a word. All the way back because JT Kelly was mad. But it was good. Let me share this last bit of reminiscing about the other day. after I said everything I had to say to JT, and I said, thank you for all that you've done, and he got the most beautiful smile on his face, and he said, I think we did all right. And he did. It was a lot of years before I really understood the sacrifice they made. You know, when you're 11 years old, you don't really get the fact. JT was 26 years old. June was, I believe, 24. Is that right? They had a baby girl, Jamie, who was 3 months and 2 weeks old. And all of a sudden, they become parents to a 17-year-old and 11-year-old. And there was a lot of sacrifices along the way. But I wouldn't trade it for anything. There's times, you know, I won't go into it all because some people would consider it embarrassment, but there were sometimes, even as a kid, you realize, man, it's getting tough. But they fought through it. And they raised us. And here's the cool thing. As I've sat here today, I said to somebody a while ago, I said, I have run so many laps around this building because by the time I would hit one side, somebody would say, hey, somebody over there wants to see you, somebody over there wants to see you. And I've run back and forth. And I've heard over and over and over again how much JT touched their life. Steve, that picture from the other church, told me, he said, even through all the battles, he touched me. If I showed you all the messages on my Facebook and the text messages I've received, people from all over the place, many that were going to try to be here today, he touched me and he said, if I can't get there, please convey my love. And I realized hundreds that I know have said, he touched me. Standing here, looking out, and I see Stout, and I see different ones. If I start naming them, I'm going to leave somebody else. I'm not going to go there. But I remember when we were, I started to say this church, but in that location, standing up there with a youth choir that at one point was as many as 50, 55 voices. JT standing down there and leading us, and we would sing and shout the house down. He touched us. Many of those messages I have received this week are from people I've not heard from since way back then. And they said, I will never forget how he poured into our lives, forced us to become better people. And so many of us that also sat in a Sunday school class forced us to face the reality of Christ and his soon return. There's so much I could say today about the heritage that he leaves behind. I would take hours, and I'm not going to do that today. But I want to share with you a conversation that my sister Doris told me this earlier this last week, and I had never heard it before. Some of you know my dad was Barney Garrett, pastored over in East St. Louis. Back in those days, we were in the same district with East Alton Church, and the churches would get together quite frequently, and about that time, in the early 60s, JT first noticed June. I shared it last night, so I might as well go there again. At that point, JT kind of was straying away from the Lord. He joined a rock band called the Morticians, bleached his hair blonde, had a blonde goatee. They traveled in a hearse. I won't go into the stories he's told me about those days. But Doris told me a story I'd never heard before. At that point in his life is when he first saw June. And my dad went to visit him. Walked up to him and said, Kelly, stay away from my girl. My dad went, and after Doris shared that with me, we got to talking about, can you imagine the reunion that took place this week in heaven? When JT walked up to my dad and said, hey, Barney, I married that girl. When we got married, we began evangelizing, and we evangelized and we pastored in the state for 50 years. We've seen hundreds saved. You have two granddaughters named Jamie and Amber. Jamie and her husband Jeff are credentialed ministers in the Church of God. They're the youth pastors of our church, and their boys, Carson and Brandon, are active in the church doing drama and all kinds of other things. That little girl, Amber, she and her husband Jerry pastor the church that I birthed. And they're doing a wonderful job. They have a boy named Tyler. Tyler just recently preached his first sermon, and I'm so proud of him. And Tyler, I want you to know, he was so proud of that moment. He had to call me and tell me all about it. And if I start talking about Emily, I'll be here all day, because that was his pride and joy. He'd have to call me all the time and tell me about her singing. Told me about her working McDonald's. Told me about her singing on the praise team and the young people, what they were doing in the church. And I could just imagine him telling my dad about his heritage. And then I think of him saying, you remember your baby boy, Darrell? We raised him. And he got crazy. But he gave his heart to the Lord. And he and his wife now have been pastoring for going on 25 years. And they've got a boy who today is an ordained minister in the Church of God. And they've got a daughter who sings and gives her talent to the Lord. And I can imagine the same look he gave me there in that hospice center. He gave it to my father. He said, we did all right. Let me kind of wrap this up. As JT's body was failing him the last few weeks, especially the last 2.5 weeks, those of us were there, some of you here were there, and you witnessed some of this as well. I saw things that will never leave me as long as I live. I saw him calling different family members, different loved ones in. I don't know all the words that were said. I only heard parts of it. He told me a little bit, but that's between them. But he called Lou in and said, God's got work for you to do. Lou, you think you're ready to retire, but JT's right. You've got a work to do. I walked into the hospital one day, and Greg, Luann's husband, was sitting there, and JT was just pouring into him, telling him about the things. Greg, there's so much more God has for you, and you need to get busy doing it. Came in another time, and Jerry was there. And if you've ever seen the finger, he's telling Jerry, God's got so much more for you to do. And he was instilling in him the vision. He did it with me. He did it with my son and his wife, and so many others. I don't have time to go into it all. But up until his very last breath, he was pouring into the lives of others. We thought we'd almost lost him. We were losing him. Jerry and I going into the room together, and we began to pray. And I'm telling you, the anointing filled that room. And all of a sudden, JT began to pray with us. And God brought him back, and he had a work to do those final days. When he came out of that, he said to me, he said, you need to know that this experience is changing Laura, my daughter. And you need to know. And he began to lay out things that God was showing him I would love to share it all with you, but it would take all day. But I witnessed the ministry of J.T. Kelly did not die. Jerry had a plaque last night. It did not die when that plaque was given to him and he retired as pastor. He ministered to his very last day. That provokes me to be better husband, better father, but better pastor. To not waste a moment, to use every breath that I have to tell people that Jesus Christ is real. And what Jesus has done, he did for you. And you need to know that without Jesus, you are going to perish into eternity. But with him, you can have life everlasting. That was the life this man lived. And as I witnessed all this, I came back home. I won't share the thought. Bishop's going to share it in a few minutes. But after that, I shared with him. As I watched all this, the words of Paul that he wrote to Timothy began to run through my head. As Paul said, I have fought a good fight, and I have finished my course. I have kept the faith. Henceforth there is laid up for me a crown of righteousness, which the Lord the righteous judge shall give me at that day, and not to me only, but unto all them that also love his appearing. JT ran his race to the finish line, and he has received that reward that Paul was talking about. And I want to say in front of everybody, well done, JT. Well done.
About this time, September 1981, I woke up in the Thorpe Church of God. We just been relocated here to Ohio. And stayed in service that morning. And there was this big guy, with big hair, a big mustache, who chased us out the door.
When you make a move in a strange territory, it was a great thing to have someone who put their arms around us and welcomed us into the family. And that was a long, long time ago. A lot of things have happened since then. I remember one of JT's sermons that I really liked to hear him preach. It was about dogs. Does anybody remember that sermon? It's a really, really good sermon. It had some good meaning to it. I have a lot of memories. One of them especially was he gave me the nickname of Crambo. I don't know where he got it, but he started calling me Crambo about 2 weeks after we met him. That's what he always called me. I got a phone call about 15 or 16 years ago from JT. He said, I'm sitting here with Albert. Do you remember Albert? And I said, yeah, I remember Albert. He said, well, I just told him you was going to sing at my funeral. He said, you are, aren't you? And I said, well, sure. So here I am, and this is for JT. He requested that I sing He Came to Me. Oh, that separate me from Christ my Lord. What
Jesus, oh, in all of you be afternoon. My name is Rick Witter. I'm the state overseer for the Church of God here in Illinois. Along with my wife, Letha, Bishop Daniel, and Jordan Maples, our state youth and discipleship directors, are here to honor the life of a great man of God. And so on behalf of the Church of God in Illinois, Sister Kelly, we want you to know that we love you. We thank God for you and for your husband, for your years of faithful service to the Lord, for the example that you have set for so many, for the way that you've invested in people, prayed for people, sacrificed, given, led with integrity. We honor you and we honor your husband. I've been asked today to read some statistics. In the Church of God, we believe in accountability, and every month, ministers report. They send in a report of their ministerial activity for the month. And when Brother Kelly passed, we got a copy of his statistics. And I want to just read some information from Brother Kelly's reports through the years. This won't mean anything to you, but his file number was 43355. James Thomas Kelly provides the date of his birth, the date of his death. He was 23 years old the first time he was licensed to preach. The exhorter date was August 22nd, 1967. He became an ordained minister December the 20th, 1984, and an ordained bishop, the highest rank in the Church of God, on November 11th, 1993. Listen to this, ladies and gentlemen. Number of sermons preached, 4,385 sermons. At 3 hours apiece, that's a lot of preaching. Number of people converted, that means salvations, people who came to Christ under this man's preaching, 2,799. Numbers sanctified, 372. Numbers baptized with the Holy Spirit, 449. Baptized in water, 255. Members added to the church, 344. And we could go on and talk about all those things. It came to me as I was reading through these statistics. These were JT's numbers. He was a man of integrity, but he was a man who was limited in his sight with physical eyes. The best he could tell, this represented accurately the activities of his ministry, but see, until JT crossed over a few days ago, he saw it with physical eyes, but now he's seeing with spiritual eyes. You know, the Lord keeps better records than we do. The Lord understands more than we understand. What he realized as he prayed with someone at the altar, many of those people he never saw again. You know what he didn't know is how many people that person led to the Lord. How many people that he has influenced in ministry. Some of you have led many people to the Lord. And I believe this, that as JT entered into, by the way, he left the land of the dying and he entered the land of the living. And when he entered the land of the living in glory with the Lord, I believe the Lord did say to him, "Well done, good and faithful servant. You've been faithful over a few things. Enter into the joy of the Lord. I'll make you ruler over many things." And I believe one of the things that is going to be such a great reward when we get to heaven is to really realize the impact of our lives. And I think JT realizes today the impact of his ministry, their ministry, through the years. The last time I was privileged to be able to visit with Brother Kelly was just moments before he went into hospice. I was headed out of town. I knew that it would be my last chance on this earth to see him, so I went by the hospital, and his wife was there, daughters were there, a son-in-law. I knew that I was saying goodbye to him, and I just thanked him for his faithfulness. I told him what a great encouragement he had been to me and to so many others. And I did all the things things that ministers do. I prayed for him. And when I got finished, he had pneumonia at that point. He had an oxygen mask on, but with a raspy voice. When I was all finished, he kind of motioned me, and I leaned over, and the family heard this. This is what he said. He said, "What can I do for you?" Now that's a dying man. With some of his last words, he wanted to know how he could serve me. And I've been at the bedside of a lot of dying people, and I've never had that question asked before. And it melted me. And I realized at that moment that I was talking to a man, I was looking in the eyes of a man who would soon be beholding the face of Jesus. And so I began to share with him. There's some things that I told him about some people in heaven that I can't see, but I know he was going to see them. What an honor and a privilege it is to see someone live and die as a servant of the Most High God. I honor this man. I honor his family. It's my privilege to be able to today transfer his membership from the Church of God in Illinois to the Church of God in heaven. Before his son-in-law, Jerry Thorpe, comes to bring the rest of this message, allow me just a moment to pray. Father, I want to thank you as we come before you in Christ's name for your goodness to us. Every person in this room today who have been impacted by the life of J.T. Kelly. Father, in your wisdom, you've taken him home. But Lord, the impact that he has left on us inspires us, encourages us, and even pushes us to live that kind of servant life. So my prayer is that each of us will surrender our lives to you even as he did. And Lord, we will one day hear those same words spoken over us. Well done, good and faithful servant. I pray your comfort, your blessings, and your peace upon Sister Kelly, upon the family, upon all the friends. We pray most of all, Lord, that you'll be glorified and honored in this place. In the name of Jesus.
I would also like to thank everybody for being here today. I know every one of you meant so much to him. I looked across the congregation last night, and I look across the congregation that's here today. One thing that I know is that everybody here has a JT story. Everywhere I go, when people found out that I'm JT's son-in-law, they would want to tell me a story about JT. They usually would start with, "Let me tell you a story about JT and I." And they would begin telling me about the things they had done together. Many of you here today, you've shared stories with me in the past. I even heard some stories tonight. I cherish every one of them. Don't stop telling the stories. Don't stop telling the stories. Some of you have shared memories with me about crazy things that you did at youth camp. Some of you would recall memories of things that you did together in ministry and how he was a major part of helping you get to where you are today. And I've heard a lot of stories from church members who he served as their pastor. And our family, we have a lot of stories that we share. And let me tell you, if each person who has a JT story was allowed to come up here today. And that if they were allowed to share it, this would go on for hours. It would go on for hours. And I was sitting in the hospital with him, and we were watching John McCain's funeral, and he made the comment, "Are they ever going to bury that man?" So we're not going to have everybody come up here and tell their stories. We know he was humorous, he was inspirational, he was fun. He was fun to be around. I am so blessed. Everybody will agree he was an experience to be around. And I am so blessed to have been able to live in that experience. I'm proud to be called part of the Kelly clan. He poured a lot into me, and I know that he's poured a lot into you as well. And I've seen a lot of Facebook posts, and I've read a lot of cards, and I'm very, very much overwhelmed. I've got a lot of stories, but he asked me to specifically talk about his church. Faith Community Worship Center. Acts chapter 2:17 says, "In the last days, God says, I will pour out my spirit upon all flesh, and your sons and your daughters will prophesy, and your young men will see visions, and your old man will dream dreams." We used to share that scripture a lot, jokingly sometimes, because he was the old man and I am the young man. See, JT pastored in Brookport, Lawrenceville, West City, and Kincaid. And he had a vision for every single one of those churches. But Faith Community Worship Center was his dream. It was his dream. When he approached the administrative bishop, he told JT, "You know, you're not a young duck anymore." Bishop Stovall was concerned because JT was dealing with a lot of health issues, and anyone who has ever planted a church knows that it has a lot of stress that goes along with it, and it is a very physical thing to do. Some of his friends even would remind him of his age, that he wasn't young anymore, but JT had big dreams. So he planted the church in 2002. We only had a dozen people or so, and a dream. That's all we had. We didn't have any money. I remember that first meeting when we came together, those dozen or so people, and we was in this old little 70 by 30 building. There was nicotine stains on the wall because it used to be a bar, and then it was a pizza place. And he took a bucket and he turned it over and he sat down, and we gathered around him, and he began pouring his vision out for this church. The congregation grew, the church became stable. In 2007, JT retired. He passed the baton to me. He explained to the congregation that day that this was his baby, and he was entrusting it to me. He kind of compared it to the time that he walked down the aisle with his daughter and placed her hand in mine. he expressed his absolute confidence in me. He had a dream. The congregation, the family, and I, we carry that vision. Even though he retired in 2007, JT remained very active in ministry. Those stats are way off, Brother Witter. I wish I would have kept track of the last 16 years, but they are way off. That's just what was recorded. And like you said, we can only see in our fleshly eyes what impact he had on other people's life and what impact he will continue to have through us on other people's lives. He continued to teach the Wednesday night adult Bible study. Every once in a while I'd let him preach. He remained active until the last couple of years. He began growing weak. The leukemia began having its effect on his body. But you know, even with that, he would muster up enough strength to still show up on Wednesday nights and teach that Bible class. I sat there as a student in that Bible class. It was very difficult for him when winter would come. When I look ahead, and it's just a few months, I was thinking about that as he was struggling. Winter's coming. During this journey over the last month, JT still had big dreams for his family and his church. After the second time that we had just about lost him, he began sharing what God had laid upon his heart. Like a patriarch in the Old Testament, he would share the dreams he had for each and every one of us. At one point, he asked me to come in, and I went to him, and even though he was very, very weak, his voice was weak, he began sharing with me what he thought the next phase of our building program should look like. See, our first phase, there was numerous times that we would be sitting in a restaurant, he would take a napkin and he would start drawing out. I've got all kinds of building pictures on napkins because he had a dream. Like usual, as he was before he began telling me what he thought this building would look like, he preceded this advice with this statement, like he did so many other times. He would precede it with, "I'm not trying to tell you what to do, but..." And then he would begin telling me what to do. And I'm really going to miss that. Him telling me what to do without meaning to tell me what to do. He has big dreams for our church, and I have a great vision that is enhanced by those dreams. Toward the end of our conversation, Jamie came in. Darrell was already there. She came in just in time for him to point his finger at me and say, "As for you..." And when he said that, I leaned forward because I thought I was getting ready to get a special word straight from the throne room of heaven. He said, "You need to loosen up. You need to loosen up." I thought, okay. He said, I may have a hard time getting used to it. But it's okay for you not to wear a tie behind the pulpit anymore. He said it's okay. So if you're a pastor here today, it's okay to dress down just a little bit. He told me, he said, I've been wrong all these years. You see, he had such great respect for the pulpit that he felt like pastors were getting, they were getting too casual about it. And he told me, he said, I've been wrong all this time. He said, being connected and relating to the people is more important than how you dress. I'm going to remove my tie. Because I never would have stood behind a pulpit without a tie with that man in the house. So I'm telling you today, I know a man that made it to the very door of heaven and back to tell me that it's okay to dress down a little bit. One thing that I noticed about him the last couple years is that he began talking about heaven quite a bit. He brought it up whenever he taught. He would bring it up whenever somehow he would get off on a tangent about heaven, no matter what he was preaching. In conversation, he would tell us stories about those who were waiting for him. A lot of it was because he outlasted the forecast that the doctors had given him for his life. You see, whenever he was diagnosed with mild dysplasia, the doctor said that he would only have about 2 quality years left. That was over 8 years ago. He had a quality life all the way up until the last couple of years, and he still made the best out of the last couple of years he had, all the way up until his last breath. As I look back over the last couple of years, and I reminisce about talking to heaven with him, and how he would talk about people who had gone on before, it was clear to me where his heart was. He had 1 foot here, and he had 1 foot in eternity. Let me tell you, those of you who know him, he has as many friends in heaven as what he does here now. I seen Sister Wiggins here today. He loved Jesse so much. I remember last time I stood on this stage, it was as an honor guard for Brother Jesse. And I can imagine the stories that they're telling now. This past summer, a few of us, family got together, and we took JT and June on a family cruise vacation. JT loved going on vacation with his family. Friday, June was going through our family photo albums. And I noticed her looking through our Disney photo album. We went there as a family. It's been several years. Probably over 10 or 12 years ago. In order to get to the theme park, there was a lake that they ferried us across. If you've ever been to Disney World, they would ferry us across this lake. And as we went across this lake, we could look up and we would see Cinderella's castle. It looked bigger than life, if you've ever been there, especially for a kid. Emily, she couldn't have been more than 4 or 5 years old, took JT by the hand and looked up at him with tears in her eyes and said, "Papa, I can't believe we're finally here. I can't believe we are here. I've waited for this all my life." I can't imagine what JT saw as he approached those pearly gates. But one thing he did do, he left us a confirmation that heaven is real. Throughout this month, this long journey, he would catch small glimpses of what was in store for him. Like I said, we about lost him twice. Even though he wasn't lucid at times, he would tell us that he was seeing some of his family members. He'd begin naming them by name. Saw his sisters, his brother-in-laws, and his mom and dad. And that last night was very, very difficult on the girls in June because they were with him. And he began telling them what was going on as he was crossing over. At one point, he looked at Amber and he asked her, "Help me through this line. Help me through this line." At another point, he told June and the girls, "I think I'm over the hump. I think I'm out of the woods." At times, he was very, very calm. And at other times during that night, he was very restless. You could see the struggle that was going on. He would mumble the names of the people he was seeing. And suddenly he said, "John." He opened his eyes and he looked at June and he goes, "Mom? John?" As if he was puzzled. And then he settled down. It took June and the girls a little while to figure out what had just happened. And it came to them. John, another mighty man of God in the state of Illinois, John Wright, had just passed away a couple days before, and we never told him about it. He was surprised to see Brother John Wright whenever he was stepping into the gates of heaven. After that, he mentioned Albert, his brother-in-law, and then he settled down once again. And it got to where as he was breathing, he would only mutter one word over and over again. Home. 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 Every time he'd inhale, he would just say home. It was his last words here on earth. At 4:15, he took his last breath here and he inhaled his first breath in heaven. Heaven is more real to me today than it has ever been before. Heaven is real. Heaven is real. The thing that has hit me the hardest about this whole ordeal is that JT doesn't need me anymore. He doesn't need me to push him around in a wheelchair or open a door. He doesn't need me anymore for all the family and friends that have been there for him. And I know you've helped him in ways that I could never imagine. He doesn't need you anymore. June, I said this last night, and it's not any easier tonight. You spent your whole life taking care of him. You've been faithful through and through. You went through this journey and you've lived this experience with him like nobody else. He doesn't need you anymore. It's time for you to take care of yourself. Family, we must take care of her. He was a king, and she is his queen. We must take care of her. I will be missed. I'll miss being there for him. But he doesn't need me anymore. As we left that hospice center Wednesday morning, we were hurting. We were hurting bad. I hurt bad now. We were hurting. We were at a loss. JT isn't coming home with us. Amber, June, Emily and I, we got into the car. And Amber turned on the ignition. It's amazing how the Holy Spirit works to comfort us. He knows exactly what we need. Amen. She turned on the ignition of the car, and the radio was playing the very ending of the song. I can only imagine. I don't think we could have sat there and listened to the song from the beginning, but he knew exactly how much of it we needed to hear. And the Father spoke to me and he said, I have JT now. I have JT now. As I walked through those doors tonight, I was hurting bad. Still am. Of course, the first thing I saw was JT. Last night, it really hit me hard because after the service was over, the grandchildren, Darrell and I, we moved that casket out of our church. And I knew that would be the last time I would see him in his church. And I know tonight but let me tell you, I walked through those doors, and yes, I saw him. But I also see his cross. And I find comfort in that cross. I might have felt loss. I might have felt like it was a loss, but it's so awesome that this cross says win. It was a win, amen. It was a win. Yes, I feel the loss right now, but it was a win. 1 Corinthians 15:54 says, so when this corruptible shall have put on incorruption, and this mortal shall have put on immortality. Then shall be brought to pass the saying that is written, death is swallowed up in victory. Death, where is your sting? Grave, where is your victory? We may feel lost, but this is a win. And let me speak to you tonight. We can go on honoring this man by becoming what God called us to be. By gaining a closer relationship with the Jesus that he sees face to face right now. Heaven is more real to me than it has ever been. And let me tell you something. I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid anymore. We don't have a lot of time left, folks. Those of you who are active in ministry, get in there and fight like you've never fought before. We're running out of time. Those of you who you're struggling with your relationship with Christ, get it right. Time's running out. And you can experience the victory that JT is experiencing right now. Amen. It's going to be hard. It's going to be hard, but let's do what God has given us a vision to do. And let's labor like we've never labored before.
less, what sort of playground?